The most popular plants in the garden and the ones you guys ask me about the most are tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. So I saved the best for last in our planting marathon. We're going to be only planting those today so that I can kind of really walk you through my thought process in terms of plant selection, how I plant them, and how I like to take care of them in the first few weeks after they're planted, which is really the most critical timing in general, because with these plants, once they're in the ground, I find them pretty simple, but getting them started and getting them in the ground, there's just a few things that it's good to keep in mind if you've never done it before or if you've had issues with it in the past. And there's different factors too depending on where you live. Like living in a northern climate, these are heat-loving plants, so they face different challenges here than they might face in a more southern climate. I am completely worn out. This is my last big planting push before I kind of get to just sit back and relax and enjoy all of the work that we put in this time of year. I still will have a few more things here and there to plant in containers, but these are the big ones. This is what really needs to be taken care of today. I'm also gonna try to get my potatoes in today, which is literally like 3 or 4 weeks late at this point. I am so behind. So from my nursery haul, this is what's left. I still have some more marigolds, which will just kind of get thrown in wherever, some celosia and some Swiss chard, which I'm also going to plant today. But the rest of this is peppers, eggplants, and then my tomatoes are still in the greenhouse, which I'll show you. So I do have some mega jalapenos here. I also have some more shishitos like we planted in the greenhouse. For eggplant, it's tricky, right? Because these are just like, it just says classic eggplant. And I typically like to do a variety that's specific to a northern climate and kind of more wind tolerant, because eggplant in particular can be really sensitive to wind and getting moved around a lot. However, I have just had really good luck with starts from this nursery in general, so even though I don't know what specific type of eggplant it is, I'm still optimistic that it will do well. I also had really good luck last year with these Ichiban eggplants, so I'm doing 2 more of those this year because they're just really fun. Like sometimes if you only have regular classic Italian eggplants, like how many different ways can I use this? But the Ichibans are long and skinny and they cook really, really fast, so I just found them to be a lot more versatile in the kitchen and just gave me more variety. So I'm also doing a bunch more banana peppers. I love a sweet pepper. I have a bunch more of those actually, as well as some more cubanelles, which I honestly don't think they're that different, but again, just to have variety. All my hot peppers, my red peppers, are in the greenhouse, which we already did that video. If you missed it, it's just a couple videos back. But from that variety pack of bell peppers tray, I still have the California Wonder, which is a green bell pepper, the lilac sweet bell pepper, and the orange blaze sweet bell pepper. So we will be putting some bell peppers out in the main garden beds today. And I know we were all waiting with bated breath to see how my tomatoes would make it after I lost the first batch I planted to the mice. I think they're pretty good. They're on the smaller side, but honestly, they're dwarf tomatoes to begin with, so I don't expect them to get as huge in the pot, and I can see that there's some roots coming out of the bottom on all of these, so I know that even though above ground they don't look huge, they're still doing some really good development in the soil. I only lost a few that I think just the roots got too damaged when I was moving them around, or they just weren't great seeds to begin with. But yeah, their true leaves are still on, a lot of them. They're just starting to fall off. I don't know. I think they look pretty good. Pretty happy. So we have a wide variety here because I ended up reordering at the last minute. And I know I've talked about this before, so I'll try to keep it brief, but I do primarily just dwarf indeterminate varieties. So that's again why they're a little bit smaller. I just find them a lot easier to manage. You still get a continuous harvest of fruit versus one huge crop, but the plants generally stay under 4 or 5 feet tall. You don't need to do a ton of major pruning. So for varieties, I've got 2 summer sweet golds, which I think are like a smaller kind of cherry tomato. I have an awesome, and then I have 4 brandy freds because they're just a classic. They're my favorite. 2 blazing beauties, which are the orange ones. 2 lemon ice, which are my yellow ones, another favorite. And a few more new ones I'm trying. I have 2 rosella, 2 Fred tie-dyes, 2 mocha cherries, which are like a medium-sized cherry tomato that's purple, and then a pomelo, which this is kind of an experiment for me. So these are the tomatoes that have like a super long storage life. Like you can like hang them and they'll last like up to a year. So I had some extra of those. I had a whole extra tray. Honestly, I way too many tomatoes, but I'm going to be sharing a bunch with friends, so they won't go to waste. Hi friends, it's Future Dagny. I had some technical issues with the audio, so you're going to see my mouth moving, not along with the audio that you're hearing, because I had to re-record it afterward. But it's only for this pepper segment, so the rest of the video should be fine. So I pre-marked out where my plants were going to go with my bamboo stakes, because it's a good idea if you're staking a plant to put that stake in before the plant is established. Because if I want to just poke this down to the root system of the plant where those roots are already spreading out, it's going to damage the roots. It could kind of cause like something like transplant shock, essentially. So it's generally a good idea if you're using bamboo stakes or trellising to just make sure they're already in place as you're planting, or you can do it immediately after planting. You don't have to do it like right before like I did. I don't always stake my peppers. I find if I plant my peppers like every 12 inches apart, they get bushy enough that they really hold each other up for the most part. I'm doing a staggered pattern with my peppers this year because I wanted to experiment and see if they got even bigger doing it that way. So there's other plants in between the bell peppers that are smaller and not necessarily as supportive. I did decide to go ahead and preemptively stake the peppers. I'm not going to be tying them up today because most of them are not really large enough. Some of them are like right on the edge of what I would consider large enough, but I kind of want the wind to hit them a little bit while the stems are still soft, because that wind will help strengthen them. So in the long run, they'll do better. They really only need to be tied to the stake once they're kind of heavy, like loaded with fruit, or actually experiencing, you know, some kind of storm that you want to protect them from. So these have been in the tray a little bit longer, so I could see a lot more root development, but they're still going straight down. They're not circling, so I'm not really worried about loosening these roots because they're root bound. You can remove those bottom true leaves if you want. I get a lot of questions about whether or not I top my peppers. I do not top the peppers. So if you don't know, topping the peppers is cutting off just the top 2 or 3 inches, and that may encourage branching depending on the variety. However, if you're growing in a short growing season like I am here in zone 6B, I've got 150 frost-free days on average, and what this does, it's injuring the plant, right? So it has to recover from that injury, which makes it take even longer before it's going to start fruiting, which we don't want when we already have a limited amount of time to get that harvest to begin with. So in my case, I don't top peppers. I know there's been a lot of experiments done with pepper topping to see if it has an impact on yield. I don't think it has an impact on yield, at least not to a degree that makes it worth the delay I would experience in getting that first harvest. Also, I just kind of go by the philosophy in general that the plants know, right? They know what they need, and any kind of topping and pruning that we do is being done for our own benefit, and it's kind of unnatural. One thing I might do is kind of just take off like damaged leaves, and I'll do that throughout this season too. I'm not over here pruning pepper plants all day long, but if I see damaged leaves or I see leaves that are below the first set of fruit, you don't really need those leaves, so I might take those off because it would significantly improve the airflow. All the crops we're talking about today are heat-loving crops, so if you have a choice in your garden between areas that see more sun and are maybe a little bit warmer, you should prioritize putting plants like this in those warmer, higher sun spots. This is also a really good time to be inspecting your plant for any aphids that might have come in from the nursery, and that's true regardless of what kind of plant it is. Anytime you're doing a transplant, it's just a good idea to give it a peek. When I grabbed these, they did have a lot of aphids on them, which is why I'm mentioning it, so I just quickly rinsed them out. When you're picking up plants from the nursery, it can be really easy to default to getting the biggest plant just because you think you're getting something that's more established, but I actually prefer to get them when they're still in these 4x4 cells because they generally are not as stressed. And the same argument applies with tomatoes too. I started my tomatoes later this year, and I'm hoping that even though that wasn't intentional, it might actually work out and give me a good way to test whether or not it's better to do them a little bit later because they won't spend as much time under artificial lights getting stressed out. But yeah, I feel like peppers are really simple overall. The more you pick them, the more peppers you get. They're really satisfying to harvest, and they stay on the plant really well for a long time if you don't want to harvest right away. We're moving on to the tomato beds. So we did 12 pepper plants outside and 12 inside, and we're doing 20 tomato plants all outside. All dwarf indeterminates in the raised beds. I am going to be doing a couple standard indeterminates in grow bags as well, but I'm not going to film those right now. So I do have a few different things going on here that I want to talk about. So with trellising for tomatoes, there's a million different ways you can do it. If you're doing them in long rows, Florida weave is by far my favorite method. You can do that using bamboo stakes, but it's better to use kind of those metal T-posts. Since I'm doing them in these 2x8 raised beds, I'm actually doing a couple different things. So last year I did the bamboo stakes with my dwarf indeterminates, which worked great because again, they don't get super tall. So it really works just fine if you've got a smaller tomato plant to just stick a stake in the ground. It's definitely the cheapest option. And with that, I will use the Velcro ties because they're really easy to adjust and reuse. I do also have these ladder trellises. Now these are meant to be stacked, so they're actually twice as tall as this is appearing right now. but because the plants are smaller, I kind of figured like I would try them unstacked so that I could have more, because they come in a set of 3. So this way I get 6, which still isn't the 20 that I need, but they're super duper durable. I really like them. I will link them down in the description for you. It's definitely not the most budget friendly option, but if you want something that's just really easy grab and go, because they don't really need as much like actual tying to get them to trellis, since you can kind of weave them in and out of the ladder form. So I think they have red and green on these, but they're kind of like the coated metals so that they won't rust, and they just feel like they're gonna last forever. So this is their 2nd season, and I'm really liking them so far. And I just kind of scattered my plants all around here. I'm going to try to leave the tags next to each of these stakes, because it might be nice to be able to keep track of. I have a lot of different new varieties this year, and I'm not 100% sure like in terms of identifying them, so it could be nice to have the labels nearby and just leave those in place. So these aren't root bound, but I am just going to gently squeeze the base here to try to get this to come out a little bit more easily and tip upside down until we get that whole plant out. Yeah, so we do have some great root development here. So even though these tomato plants are a little bit behind where I might like them to be, I'm still optimistic that we'll have a great tomato harvest this year, even though it might be a little bit later than I would hope, so we might not get as many. So this is a blazing beauty, and I can already smell it, which is amazing. Now, if you were planting a larger tomato, one of the things that's like a hack that you'll see on the internet all the time that I do actually do and I think works is to plant up until the top of the stem there. It will develop roots all along the stem. Now, the little fuzzy hairs that you see, those are trichomes. They're not actually roots that will develop. Some people will say that online, and that is not accurate, but it does work, and that is how we got such great root development all the way down the entire depth of this container. Was I buried the entire stem of the plant. This is a lemon ice. You can take off those first true leaves if you want, especially if you've got a bigger plant and you want to bury it. You can even take off the set above that, and that will work totally fine. But again, with tomatoes, it's really important to get that trellis system in place right away when you plant them. Just really firm the soil around it as you transplant. Pruning tomatoes is obviously the biggest conversation around tomatoes once you've got them already planted. One of the things I like about the dwarf indeterminates, they don't really need aggressive pruning. It can be nice for airflow, which is a big issue here. We have pretty humid summers. This is a tie-dye Fred, or Fred's tie-dye. I generally don't prune my dwarf indeterminates much at all. Like, they really don't get super bushy. In terms of amending the soil, a lot of people will tell you different things you can put into your soil, into the planting hole with tomatoes to encourage them to grow bigger, faster, be more productive. There's some truth to some of those things, but a lot of it is just internet rumors, truly. Like, if you crush up eggshells or you soak a banana peel, yes, the nutrients that tomatoes like are present in those things, but they are not necessarily bioavailable. If they're not bioavailable, then all you're doing is kind of wasting energy, because you put something into the ground that the tomato can't access those nutrients. This is a mocha cherry. It's actually one of the biggest ones, and it's really beautiful. It has very dark leaves. One thing that can be really effective is to add a little bit of worm castings into the hole. Worm castings just add a lot of beneficial microbes to the soil that can help your plants to grow really well. In these beds, I actually previously amended them right before I planted everything out, so they got a fresh top dressing of new soil, which obviously had fresh fertilizer in it, and then I also added kind of a lot of granular plant food. This is our Piamello. I like the granular plant foods because I feel like they have a more extended release. In these beds, I don't do compost because it's too heavy, but that is also a great option. Just top dressing your beds in general. Amending into a planting hole is just adding a whole extra step that just has never felt worth it to me, when I can just amend the whole bed at once in bulk and know that all of the soil is really good. I'm gonna put another mocha cherry right here. You'll also probably notice that as you transplant things, like these grew a lot and developed a lot of roots indoors, but as soon as they get outside, something just shifts for them. They know they're in the right environment, and they just start to do way better. So I usually see a lot of really rapid growth with my tomatoes. Now, this won't apply to my tomatoes, but if you are doing regular indeterminates, it's a good idea to keep on top of that pruning as part of just like my regular daily gardening routine. I will come out and just check on everything, look for hornworms, because those can do a lot of damage in a really short amount of time, and add any supports that need to be added in terms of tying up and trellising right away, because tomatoes, they really do just like explode in growth very quickly. And so if you wait and you only do it once a week on an indeterminate, at least during certain points in the season where things are really like taking off, it can just become a really overwhelming project. It's not necessarily that it's bad for the tomato. It just makes it harder to take care of if you're low energy or chronic pain. So small steps every day versus a big project once a week works better for me. It's like once they're in the ground, it's really just monitoring for blight, removing those leaves if they do develop blight, which usually doesn't happen until later in the season, at least here. Monitoring for pests, for hornworms, keeping on top of your pruning, keeping on top of your trellising. And tomatoes are pretty heavy feeders. I like to fertilize mine about every 3 to 4 weeks, especially in the beginning. Like, we really don't want tomato leaves touching the soil because that's a huge disease vector. So I like to make sure I'm really monitoring their growth at the beginning and taking care of anything that needs to be pruned off pretty quickly. But I don't like to do a prune within like the first couple of weeks because I like to give them a chance to really establish. So this was the summer sweet gold, and we're going to be doing a brandy fried right here with some dill that self-seeded from last year. Having a really big, strong root system on a tomato plant at this stage is way more important to me than having a bunch of upright growth, because that will come. Once the root system is there, all that other stuff is going to take care of itself. These are very happy, healthy plants, even though they're small. My favorite thing about growing tomatoes from seed is that you get that tomato smell even earlier. You can just go into wherever you're growing your seedlings. So my main goals when I'm planting my tomatoes are just don't disturb the roots, although they're not super delicate to that. Keep the leaves from touching the soil, bury as much of the stem as possible, get the soil nice and firm around each plant. We're gonna move on to the next bed. I did stick the piamellos on the ends of both of these beds because they are not dwarfs, and I'm anticipating them getting really unruly. So first of all, I wanted to know where they were without having to think about it. And second of all, I just really like the flexibility of having them on the end in case I have to switch out the trellis. They won't really get in the way of the other plants, compete for light, and we're trying to just cover as much of that stem as possible. We got a brandy fried right here. This is where my graphing comes in really handy because we had already done all of those seeds direct sown into this bed, and a lot of them haven't come up yet. So I need to know where I put them without really having to think about it, and I can just check back on that graph and make sure I'm not digging something up that I just planted. I actually didn't do tomatoes for the longest time. I didn't want to deal with blight and all the hornworms and pruning. But once I discovered that there were the dwarf indeterminates, it suddenly felt more doable because I didn't want to do determinants and only get one round of tomatoes all at once. And I also didn't want to deal with unruly plants that needed constant tending. And this was just such a great compromise, and they did so well last year and had such great flavor. This is another summer sweet gold, just pinching up those true leaves. As far as like soil temperature goes, like a lot of people in New England, especially like old timer gardeners, will tell you not to plant your tomatoes and other heat-loving crops until Memorial Day. I think that advice was before like climate change was such a problem, because Now, I could have probably planted these as early as like our last frost, which was May 5th, because the soil was already so warm. And when I say it was already so warm, I don't actually use a soil thermometer. I have a soil thermometer. I've never used it. I probably never will. I don't know. Something about it just has never felt necessary. Like, I know when it's warm out, and I know when it's been warm out long enough and stayed warm overnight long enough. But it also depends on how you garden and where you garden. These raised beds don't have the soil like density of an in-ground bed because they're elevated off of the ground. So what I've discovered is they freeze a lot faster than an in-ground bed, but they also thaw a lot faster, so I feel like they get warmer sooner. I am finding worms in almost every single hole, and I am so thrilled. That's the awesome tomato. Better live up to the name. It's a new type for me this year. This is a Roselle. I've always been fascinated with the kind of cult following around tomatoes. Like, people are very devoted to their varieties and their methods, how they care for the plants, how they fertilize, when they plant. So it's hard for me to tell you like this is the one right way. I think what's so great about gardening in general, but especially tomatoes, is there are so many different ways and so much variety. And part of the fun is in experimenting and finding the flavors you like, the growth habits you like. This is a Fred tie-dye. For companion plants, tomatoes have a lot of really good ones. I'm doing all the classics in this bed. So I've got carrots, I have basil, which unproven theory, apparently it can improve the flavor of your tomatoes. And I also have marigolds, which have helped me in the past with repelling hornworms. To me, I'm at a point, I feel like this is how you know you're like a gardener officially. You have your tomatoes, you have your set varieties that you grow every year that you love. You have like your strong opinions, and they may be different. They probably will be different than other people's, but they're yours and you feel confident and set in them. I don't know what this plant is. There's like multiple things over here I do not recognize, but they look like real plants. I feel like I should leave them. Tomatoes are taking me a little longer because the holes are a little bit deeper. This is a lemon ice. I've also seen people plant their tomatoes where they bend the stem over underground. I guess I don't really understand the purpose of that. Like, just bury it deeper. It's the same idea. You're stressing the plant out, I feel like. I have a feeling these are just going to take off now. And for our trellis here, we've got 2 more brandy freds and a blazing beauty. And again, another plant here I don't recognize, but looks like a... I don't know, maybe that's a weird thing to say. Like, I kind of can tell if something is a weed or a real plant, an intentional plant, even if I don't know what that plant is. And I feel like that might not make a whole lot of sense to someone who hasn't been gardening for a very long time. In terms of irrigation for tomatoes, like, we want to make sure we're not getting a whole lot of water on the leaves because that can help encourage blight, which we do not want. I prefer some kind of an underground watering method for a couple reasons. It's going to encourage stronger, deeper root systems. It's going to keep all that moisture off of the surface of the plant, so you don't even have to worry about that being a factor for disease. I don't know, I've done it for a few years now and it just seems to work better. So these planters have invisible watering built into them. They have what's called sub-irrigation. So there's food safe trays underneath the soil that water the plants, and I get a lot of people saying, well, doesn't that cause root rot? It's definitely less regulated than like an Oya, which isn't going to put more water into the soil than is needed, but the plants never sit in standing water. Like, the tray has like almost like a grate design to it, so they don't get overwatered. I've never had an issue with that. All right, 20 plants in the ground. Our Ichiban eggplant are gonna go in this bed. There's actually 2 here, but they're so established. I'm not sure how I'm gonna cut them apart. I feel like the hori could work. This makes me nervous. They're really growing together. I'm worried about that. Sometimes it's nice because you get a bonus plant, but a lot of the times it's more just like you end up damaging one because you can't plant them right next to each other. I do like to remove the bottom leaves on these, but I'm not burying the stem the way that I would with the tomatoes. And the thing with eggplant is it is really sensitive to the wind, like I said. I don't have stakes on these right now, but I probably should add some. I'm really pushing it into the soil because I don't want it to flop over. We're gonna try to plant this 3rd one, but I'm not optimistic. I don't know what's gonna happen. All right, and then the next bed has the 4 classic eggplants. Eggplants, just a really simple, straightforward one to plant in terms of keeping it healthy. I really don't do anything. I've never had any disease issues. Like, it's more about picking the varieties that you want. I really wanted to do a white eggplant and a fairy tale eggplant this year, but they're hard to find, and I never have great luck starting eggplant from seed either. But any eggplant is better than no eggplant at all. So I'll be very happy if these do well. And I do have another container variety coming in that will go in a grow bag, I think. It's more just about like when you have varieties that you know can have issues in your area because they're heat loving and you're not a heat loving area or something like that, giving yourself, like hedging your bets and giving yourself a lot more variety so that you can experiment and see which types do well for you. All right, I think because that went really well and really fast, we do have time to plant the potatoes in grow bags, which I'm pretty psyched about because this is one of my favorite things to do. So this year I'm growing Adirondack blue potatoes, and these are supposed to be really good for French fries and for mashed potatoes, and they do have a purple interior, which you won't get to see today because the pieces I cut up have already calloused over. But in terms of growing seed potatoes in grow bags, I love to grow potatoes in grow bags because it is so much easier to harvest if you have back pain or limited energy. They're just, it's literally just pour it out. You get every potato, you don't have to stress that you've missed them. So I prefer to do it this way. I also think they just get really good drainage, really good aeration. You can control the soil. With potatoes, it's pretty important that you have a light, fluffy soil. These probably should have gone in the ground a few weeks ago, but they only have 90 days to maturity. So I'm going to put them in. They should be totally fine. So there's early, medium, and late day varieties of potatoes. I'm acknowledging that, but I don't understand it well enough to explain it, so I'm not going to. Just be aware that it is a thing, and you should make sure that whatever seed potato variety you're growing will grow in your zone, because that is going to depend on like whether it's an early maturing or late maturing variety. I think these are somewhere in the middle at 90 days. So we won't have to wait until fall to harvest them, which is really nice. I grow my potatoes in 10-pound grow bags, and I like to grow 4 pieces of seed potato in each 10-pound grow bag. Now, sometimes when you get the potatoes as seed potatoes, they can be kind of big. This is the perfect size. It's like about the size of an egg, and you can see it's got all these little sprouts off it. Ideally, these would be about an inch long. For some reason, mine never got any longer than this, even though they were sprouting even longer than they were supposedly needed to sprout in it inside. So you just want to keep them out of direct sunlight to sprout them, but in somewhere warm. So I put them on a windowsill. Any pieces that are larger than this, I did cut. I ended up just cutting a couple of them in half because you still want to have ideally 2 to 3 eyes, or these little sprouts, on each piece that you cut. So that can also kind of limit you. So I'll do 4 potato pieces in each bag. One thing I've always hated about growing potatoes is that you typically have to hill them. But a lot of people don't realize that tomatoes come in indeterminate and determinate varieties a lot of the same way that tomatoes do. So you can actually grow a determinate variety, and those do not need to be hilled, and Adirondack blue is one of those types. So with a determinate potato in a grow bag, you really just want about 4 or 5 inches of soil at the bottom. Then you put in your seed potatoes, and then you can fill it all the way to the top immediately. You don't have to wait until the little leafy parts come up and then start hilling more soil on top of that over and over again every week. So it's just a lot less steps to it, which is really nice. So we've got 4 pieces in this bag, and we'll do 4 pieces in the other bag, and then we just fill it up and we're good to go. It's the easiest, most straightforward way you can grow potatoes. If you do have pieces that you end up having to cut up because they're too big, it's a good idea to do that the day before you plant so that that cut can kind of dry and callus over, just to help prevent any issues with rotting. All right, that's all I'm gonna plant today. I'm gonna reward myself with my first asparagus harvest. I'm so excited. This stuff, if you've ever had fresh asparagus, like you literally don't even need to cook it. It's so fresh and juicy. The best thing ever. I hope this video was helpful, but if you have any questions about growing tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, eggplants, leave them down in the comments. I'll try to help you out. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss future videos like this one, and I'll see you next time. Oh, it's so good.